Live from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, I'm Sonali Basak.
And I'm Tim Steinevec. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto, a look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
And Bitcoin is sliding below that $67,000 mark. It hasn't been able to sustain the rally after pro-crypto remarks by former President Donald Trump.
We discuss these remarks and how crypto is playing a role in the upcoming U.S. election with the CEO of that Bitcoin conference.
And the new Ether ETFs see inflows in their first week of trading as investors pull money from a high-fee legacy product. We're going to discuss the performance of the fund launches with Franklin Templeton.
All that and more ahead over the next half hour. First, though, a look at what's been happening in crypto over the past week. We did see some big moves for Bitcoin, falling as low as $63,500 on Thursday, and then rising to flirt with $70,000 yesterday. If it hit that, it would be the first time since mid-June. A wallet linked to the U.S. government did move $2 billion of Bitcoin to a new address on Monday. That's according to the blockchain research firm Arkham Intelligence. Net, though, coming right back to just around $66,000, where it started the week at. You can see the way Bitcoin moved on Saturday, though, as we did hear from former President Donald Trump and Republican presidential candidate. Trump did make comments at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville. Much more on that in just a minute. Now, as far as Ether goes, up for the last 2 days, but seeing a little bit of selling today, down 4.6% over the last week. And then checking out shares of GBTC. They're actually lower today by 0.7%. It comes after Grayscale announced the launch of a mini Bitcoin trust at a lower expense ratio. Now, as of today, existing GBTC holders will get part of this mini fund with the ticker BTC. Sonali?
I want to take a look at 1 week in those spot Ether ETFs, exactly how they're doing. Even the ones that are seeing inflow, of course, in their first week of trading are seeing a 4% decline or more for the most part. Remember, Tim, this is really in line with what you're seeing in the decline of Ether prices, spot Ether prices alone. So orderly, if you will. But at the end of the day, a lot of this comes down to where the money is going. And I know you are looking at those flows.
Yeah, look at that, 4% declines all around for the last week. But let's look at those Ether ETFs, the 8 new funds that launched just a week ago. It should be no surprise that we saw the existing Grayscale fund, ETHE, see massive outflows, down $1.72 billion flowing out of it. The high fees of 2.5% against the new offerings helping to drive these numbers. Now, the fund actually had the most outflows of any ETF over the last week. On the other end, you see BlackRock leading the way with inflows at the top of the board, $500 million into the fund over the last week. And just last week, we caught up with the firm's head of digital assets, Robert Mitchnick. Here's what he had to say.
It's a really beneficial thing for investors and for markets. What's happened with these ETFs, they've brought access to these assets, which many investors clearly have wanted. There's a ton of demand from our clients, clearly, to be able to access the leading crypto assets within the exchange-traded wrapper. And so it's been a great year from that standpoint.
We're going to discuss the Ethereum demand with Roger Bayston, who is the head of digital assets at Franklin Templeton. Their Ether ETF ticker is EZET. And Roger, you take a look at the demand you saw initially for this spot Ethereum ETFs. Was there somewhat a disappointment here? Because you did not see Ethereum rally into these launches the way you saw with Bitcoin.
No, there's no disappointment at all. I think we're super early in this transition of making crypto easy to access. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to do at Franklin Templeton, demystify the open access into the brokerage accounts that have been trusted places that investors, large and small, have kept their assets for decades now. In these ETF wrappers, it becomes much easier to invest in these ETFs. And I think, quite frankly, we're excited about not just the Ethereum and Bitcoin, but what things might be coming forward as this crypto and blockchain native digital asset infrastructure continues to grow.
What can you tell us about who exactly is buying into Ethereum ETFs? There's been a lot of question around whether financial advisors, retail investors would buy into spot Bitcoin at a greater pace, and Bitcoin, of course, is more well-known. How much adoption are you really seeing when it comes to Ethereum?
Well, you're right. The Bitcoin brand is global. It has been something that the investors have haven't been aware of for a long period of time. Ethereum as a project, it doesn't have that same sort of brand recognition, but it's a super important network. It is the scalability of Ethereum to be able to solve lots of different problems and tackle lots of different challenges in this decentralized space going forward is very solid. We think investors ultimately are going to look at diversified portfolios of digital assets, whether they're Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other exciting projects that are continuing to expand.
Roger, do you ever get concerned that Ethereum is just too complicated for the average investor? They understand what Bitcoin is as a store of value. I think it's fair to say. Many may not agree with it, but that concept is not super complicated. They understand an ETF that tracks the S&P 500 index, for example. But Ethereum's a completely different animal.
You're right. Ethereum is a completely different animal. It's a different type of network, and it has multi-purpose. I think the shortest bridge to understanding Ethereum for the investor class are going to be those that have technology-related investments into their portfolios. This decentralized distributed ledger ecosystem that might come in and supplant and substitute for centralized database systems. These are real serious opportunities with real efficiency gains for those who are exploring that. I mean, we have a lot of confidence at Franklin Templeton because we've been building inside of blockchain environments for several years now as we brought our Benji tokenized U.S. government money market fund into the marketplace. So understanding the different nuances of the networks is certainly important. The best technology, quite frankly, doesn't really factor into consumers or investors, visibility about what that technology might be. But for sure, we're seeing these blockchain ecosystems offering efficiency gains relative to current products. And so we see the migration continue to move toward there. Complexity from an investor's perspective, yes, but from a user, those who are building new products and services, I think it's whether it's Ethereum or other layer 1 or even layer 2 blockchains on top of Ethereum are super important projects that will continue to find traction in the overall economy. We think of them as utility pipes for the data economy. You're going to find a lot of application.
Roger, what's success for you when it comes to this specific ETF, the spot Ether ETF? When you're at the end of the year in December this year and you look back over the previous 6 months, what's the number you want to see in assets under management in there?
Well, we don't really have a target for AUM on the Ethereum ETF. We know that these markets come and go. It's a thematic story that's super important for investors to weave into their portfolios for the long time. The tactical timing when investors come and go into the marketplaces and into the products, I think is subject to a wide range of factors. We do believe that when we think about Ethereum, it's the continued expansion of projects that grow on top of Ethereum. In many ways, Ethereum can be seen as a diversified technology play itself. There's a lot of different projects being built on top of the Ethereum ecosystem. There's blockchains extending the Ethereum virtual machines, the EVMs, the layer 2s. They keep extending the depth of Ethereum as well into the environment. These are super important.
Speaking of expanding the environment here, recently Franklin Templeton Digital came out with a tweet that said that you believe in other major developments that will drive the crypto space forward. Solana, for example, has shown major adoption and continues to mature. Does Franklin Templeton have a plan to put a spot Solana ETF into place and get one off the ground?
I think we continuously evaluate all the networks and the application of what they might have and the appetite for investors to weave them into their portfolios as well. So that is something that's a decision that's still on a forward basis. But there's no doubt that diversification, as it applies to your equity portfolios and your credit portfolios, is something that's going to be important for investors as the digital asset ecosystem continues to grow. So I think we'll take these one at a time, but continue to factor in that a diversified portfolio is probably what's best approach for investors in the long term.
Okay, Solana is something that you're considering. Roger, give us a handful of other things that are on the table that we could see, not necessarily will see, but could see from Franklin Templeton.
Yeah, I think it's really about, again, continuing to be very attentive to the underlying dynamics and the projects that are expanding and growing these networks. Again, our confidence comes from the fact that we've been building infrastructure for asset management and capital markets inside of the blockchains. And when we're doing that, it gives us a unique perspective on understanding what the forward applications might be for these blockchains. And then, of course, we do some rigorous tokenomics about each one, because no one blockchain is the same. And there's unique characteristics that you want to take into consideration when you're valuing them for going forward. But I think Solana is something that's really got a lot of opportunity ahead of it, just as Ethereum has had. And we're going to continue to see use cases grow across any number of these, whether it's Ethereum or Solana moving forward. We see blockchain really intersecting with AI trend that's happening right now, because these networks of provenance of truth are going to be really important in the record-keeping system for this data economy moving forward.
Roger, appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Roger Bayston, head of digital assets over at Franklin Templeton. And coming up, Donald Trump tries to shore up voters in participating in crypto markets. We're going to discuss with the head of the conference that he headlined on Saturday.
And crypto miner CleanSpark shares his take on Trump's Bitcoin narrative and the future of his business.
And to access all of the latest data and news on crypto, check out CRYP Go on the Bloomberg terminal. This is Bloomberg.
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
That was Donald Trump over the weekend, making his pitch to crypto enthusiasts and potential voters at the Bitcoin conference. And we're going to discuss that with the head of the conference, David Bailey. He joins us now. David, maybe perhaps outline here the intention. This was obviously a massive conference. You didn't have just former President Trump. You had a lot of people from across the industry. You had other lawmakers as well. You had large executives from Wall Street firms like Howard Lutnick of Cantor Fitzgerald. What is your end game?
Well, what is our end game? Our end game is we want to see Bitcoin universally adopted globally. We want to see it adopted by the individual. We want to see it adopted by the corporation, and we want to see it adopted by the nation state. So, we call this vision hyper-Bitcoinization, and so that's the focus and goal of the conference. And it's been pretty incredible to watch it go from the early days where, when Bitcoin got mentioned on a TV show, the entire community was freaking out, to now we had 2 of the 3 major presidential candidates making their case to the Bitcoin community at the conference. So it's pretty incredible to watch the transformation that's occurred in just a little over a decade. And it was, very exciting to hear the president make his pitch for Bitcoin made in America, which you can see from my hat that I'm sporting today. So I think, the conference is really a symbol of how far we've come, and I think it's a taste of what's to come.
Speaking of transformations, the former president and current Republican nominee, Trump, has transformed the way that he's thought about crypto, thought about Bitcoin, and now is positioning himself as a big advocate for it. How do you know that he's not just saying these things to you and to the crypto community to shore up support ahead of the election and to get votes? After all, in the past, politicians, including him, have said things that they didn't necessarily follow through on. He talked about getting universal health care for everyone in the U.S. and for the 2016 election, and he tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. He said he wouldn't raise taxes on, or he said he would raise taxes on the wealthy, and he didn't do that with the 2017 tax cuts when he got into office. How do you know that he's going to follow through if he is elected?
Well, first off, in terms of Donald Trump, his position on Bitcoin evolving, I would say Bitcoin's biggest cynics, who start as Bitcoin's biggest cynics, become the biggest champions of Bitcoin. Michael Saylor started as a cynic of Bitcoin. I started as a cynic of Bitcoin. I mean, when you first hear about Bitcoin, its potential, its promise, it sounds too good to be true. And so I think that that's the natural evolution that anyone goes through. They start very skeptical, and over time, as they have more and more exposure to it, they go along this intellectual journey where they become more interested in it. And I think also what was really impactful on the president, he has family, children that have gotten very involved in Bitcoin, and I think that kind of mirrors the experience that a lot of people have had. Like it's a very tech savvy, youngest generation type technology. And so, once you start having family members get involved in it, that expose you to it, you become more open-minded about, how it works, what it is, and what its potential is.
What were your conversations like with the former president around crypto? He did call you out on stage personally.
Well, I don't want to talk about private conversations that, I've had with the president. I want to keep those private. But I do think that, as an industry, we really have a choice to make between someone who is working with us and engaging in productive dialogue with our industry, with our community, and someone who hates our industry, has told us, in the not nicest way that we, are criminals. And I think, when we compare the current position of the Democratic Party against the Republican Party, it's very hard to rally around the Democratic case for Bitcoin.
Bitcoin still reached a record under the current administration, and there were 2 spot ETFs approved. Why is it seen that this administration was so tough on Bitcoin when so much had gotten done?
I think it's important to highlight that the way the spot ETF got approved is we had to sue the SEC. So it wasn't like they gladly did that. It was a multi-year litigation. And so, it has been pulling teeth this entire time to work with the current administration. They have blocked public offerings from going to market. They have cracked down on developers. They've arrested developers. They've proposed horrific tax policies and tax schemes for Bitcoin mining. So it's been a very tough administration to work with, and only since we have started, supporting the President Trump's campaign have we seen a pivot in messaging from the Democratic Party that, hey, maybe we do want to work with you.
Okay,
and
David, we only have 30 seconds left, but what would you have to hear from the Harris campaign to call her pro-crypto?
It's beyond having to hear from her, because she's in power right now. If she wants to start to reset the relationship, she needs to not sell America's Bitcoin. She needs to fire Gary Gensler today, and she needs to free Ross Ulbricht from prison today. And so they can't be words, because she's actively in charge of the country right now. She needs to act on those 3 things, and then we at least would be in a place where we can have a productive dialogue.
All right.
That is David Bailey of the Bitcoin conference. Of course, they are gearing up for the next one next year in the West Coast. We will talk more about that at another date. But coming up, we're going to continue the election conversation with the CEO of Bitcoin miner CleanSpark. That conversation up next. This is Bloomberg.
Let's get to the state of the crypto mining business. CleanSpark owns 6,500 Bitcoin in total. CEO Zach Bradford joins us now. Zach, good to see you. Before we get to the state of the business, I do want to talk a little politics here, coming fresh off of President Trump's appearance on Saturday. You certainly argued that that was historic, what we saw at the Bitcoin conference. I'll pose the same question to you. What do you need to see from Vice President Harris to convince you that she would support crypto in the White House?
It was a historic moment. We now have 2 presidential candidates that have come out in favor of Bitcoin, between Kennedy and also Trump. I think action, I agree with what David said, action's required. When you're currently in power, you shouldn't be held to a standard of talking about what you're going to do. It should be about what you are doing. It's been a tough road for the industry. There hasn't been a lot that's made it easy to, progress forward. And I think that we need to see an open mind. The thing that I'm most disappointed about is there was not a single person from the other side of the aisle at the conference. And, in addition to former President Trump being there, there was a lot of senators, there were governors, there were a lot of individuals there, but they were all from one side of the aisle. And I think that from a party line approach, there needs to be reaching out to the industry, gaining an understanding, and then taking action for those that are currently in power.
Zach, I have a question about the content of the speech here. A lot of what former President Trump was talking about was electricity, the need for more electricity to really fuel this Bitcoin industry. Do the clean efforts go away in the Bitcoin mining industry in a future potential Trump administration?
No, I don't think so. CleanSpark, we pride ourselves in being one of the most or the least carbon intensive miners in the country. Last year in our sustainability report, we cited over 80% carbon-free power. Almost no other industry is pushing as hard as the Bitcoin mining industry has been into this carbon-free narrative. Something that has been broadly cited is the only way to achieve our future energy goals for this country, which includes electric vehicles, which includes all the AI and the data center innovation that needs to happen, but also Bitcoin mining. What is needed from there is probably nuclear power. That's going to be something that our country needs to develop and transition into. The benefit that Bitcoin miners have, of course, is we can use power that would otherwise go unused. For example, at the edge of the grid, when a new asset is deployed, on average, it's underutilized for 5 years. That is the perfect place for Bitcoin miners to be. It's why we've developed so much in rural areas. And that energy ultimately creates prosperity in those communities. But I don't think that the clean, part of this needs to go out the window. I think that all industries, not just Bitcoin mining, not just data centers, we all want clean air. We all want clean water to drink, and it's up to all of us to get it done. But we need more power. We're never going to save ourselves into an abundant future.
Can you do this on your own? Can the industry do it on its own, or does it need government intervention to provide that power?
What we need is we can probably do it on our own. We don't need government intervention to create the power or to create the opportunity. What we need is we need a government that's not going to stand in the way. Ultimately, that's been our request, and we've made this publicly and broadly.
Zach,
we're not asking for anything special. We just don't.
We gotta leave it there. That is CleanSpark CEO Zach Bradford. Sorry, we're heading up against the clock, but we appreciate your time today.
Back,
and
Zach.
Of course, very critical moment after that speech from the Bitcoin conference. Everything being touched on, from the sake of electricity to political rhetoric around this election. But for now, that does it for Bloomberg Crypto. Join us again, same time, same place next week. This is Bloomberg.